Hi everyone, just a quick video from me because I want to respond to a couple of things regarding this alibi document that I discussed yesterday. What is wrong with Idaho and their demand for a specific kind of alibi? You know, I've heard so many people saying this is alibi-ish. I think that's Law and Crime Network quote. Because they believe that he will need a witness. A witness. So if you're going for a drive at night on your own, you've got to have somebody who saw you. Well, I'm sorry, surely an expert who can show his exact movements by his phone is better than an eyewitness who, in whatever time in the morning, said, yeah, I saw him taking pictures of the stars that night. I mean, it's not likely, is it? Just as much as it's not likely that somebody who said they were asleep can prove it. Who's standing next to their bed and saying, he didn't sneak out the window. I doubt it. I saw him go into his room. He must have been asleep. Or somebody who says, well, he got up in the morning and had breakfast. It means nothing. But are they telling me that that sort of witness is better than this data expert? I just don't understand it. If an expert can prove that Kohberger was not there at the time of the murders, you do not really get better than that, do you? It just beggars belief. And this prosecution attorney that appeared on Law and Crime Network, I'm getting to a point where I can't watch these things because they quote untruths and it's making my blood boil. I just have to turn off. I watched this on Dinky IMO's channel and I'm sitting there and I think Dinky and the panel felt the same, where this prosecution attorney said, how do they explain he turned his phone off? It does not say in the PCA that he turned his phone off. I just feel that this is all part of the biased propaganda that is being pumped out. I'll read it to you from the PCA. It's on page 11. As part of this investigation, law enforcement obtained search warrants to determine cellular devices that utilised cellular towers in close proximity to the King Road residence on November the 13th between 3 and 5 a.m. After determining that Kohberger was associated to both the 2015 Elantra and the 8458 phone, investigators reviewed these search warrant returns. A query of the 8458 phone in these returns did not show the 8458 phone utilising cellular tower resources in close proximity to the King Road residence between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. That is what it says. It was not utilising towers near the King Road residence. This pretty much backs up the fact that Kohberger was probably in the middle of the countryside with no phone signal. It then goes on to say, based on my training, experience and conversations with law enforcement officers, so they've obviously just, had a chat with their donuts in their office, individuals can either leave their cellular telephone at a different location before committing a crime or turn their phone off prior to going to a location to commit a crime. This is done by subjects in an effort to avoid alerting law enforcement that a cellular device associated with them was in a particular area where a crime is committed. I also know that on numerous occasions, subjects will surveil an area where they intend to commit a crime prior to the date of the crime. Depending on the circumstances, this could be done a few days before or for several months prior to the commission of a crime. During these types of surveillance, it's possible that an individual would not leave their cellular telephone at a separate location or turn it off, since they do not plan to commit the offence on that particular day. So this PCA, this pain in my butt, is saying that he knows that, perps on the day of the crime will take their phone and turn it off about the time they're going to commit the crime. But when they're stalking, they quite often don't bother leaving their phone at home or turning it off because they're not going to do it on that day. The paragraph immediately before Payne assumes Kohberger may have turned his phone off because that's what perps do. He goes on to describe Kohberger's education. He says, based on information provided on the WSU website, Kohberger is currently a PhD student in criminology at WSU. Pursuant to records provided by a member of the interview panel for Pullman Police Department, we learned that Kohberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. He'd already studied cloud-based forensics. It wasn't like a module in his current PhD studies. He knew a lot about it because he wrote an essay for the police department saying he had an interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyse technological data in public safety operations. So he's pretty technical, and he's studying criminology at PhD level. Does Payne really think that Kohberger would not know that perps normally turn their phones off at the time of crime? He would have known. Whether you're book smart, street smart, I don't care, but if you are a person with any ounce of intelligence who knows this stuff, you're not going to do exactly the same thing. It beggars belief to me. I just don't understand how law enforcement are expecting us to believe that this works, that this washes. It doesn't wash. It doesn't make sense. And it's a big question, always a big question, that if Kohberger committed this crime, why did he need his phone? Why did he take his phone? I now believe that Kohberger drove with his phone that night to a park that he often visited with his phone and then lost signal, because actually everything in the PCA jives with that. I also question, this need for an eyewitness. Is this why law enforcement put in Dylan as an eyewitness? Because let's not forget, she was originally on the first floor with Bethany, who'd both got home by 1 a.m. That all changes in the PCA, and Dylan's on the second floor and happens to catch sight of the perp. So why didn't they put out a description of the suspect before they caught Kohberger? Yes, you can argue they wanted to protect the witnesses, but they didn't have to say who the witnesses were. And if they were desperate to catch who did this, wouldn't they put out everything they could, like real footage of the car, not stock images? And we have a description of someone of 5'10" or over, with bushy eyebrows and athletic build. Now, how stupid does that sound? Either they genuinely had that description from Dylan, which I'm sorry, I personally doubt it, but that's just my opinion. But if it was real, how could they have put out such a weak thing as, we're looking for a guy with bushy eyebrows? Can you imagine how many people would have been accused of that crime in Moscow? And they would have been laughed at. It's like, that's what you've got. 5'10", athletic build, clad in black with bushy eyebrows. It's nothing. It's lacking. You cannot convict someone on that description, but I think that's why they put that in the PCA, because they too needed an eyewitness. It ticked that box. I'm thinking about this exculpatory evidence that Anne mentions in this alibi document. It can't be the evidence, or I doubt it's the evidence that Bethany is supposed to have. I think it's something that this witness can help them with. And then I thought that in this document, Anne mentions that he often took photos, but she doesn't say that he took photos that night. Did she leave that out deliberately? Is this what she's talking about? This is pure speculation, but what if Bryan took photos at the park that night too, and they had timestamps, and law enforcement have not put those forward? They would have taken Bryan's phone. What if they got rid of those photos and this expert can retrieve them? I think this is very feasible. And if that is the case, if they can do something like this and say, here are photos he took that night, there's the timestamp, law enforcement did not put this information forward, well, that would be freedom for Kohberger, wouldn't it? You know, if there is this evidence out there that proves he wasn't there, it needs to come out, because the right person has to pay for what happened. You know, this prosecution attorney on the Law and Crime Network is trying to say that the defence are scrabbling around with what they've got. Of course they're going to do this. But he fails to mention that maybe this expert witness can prove he was not there. That's massive. That's an alibi. So we'll see. We'll wait and see. But, you know, I don't understand why Moscow, Idaho need a specific alibi. It should be about proof, whether it's an eyewitness or technology, technical data. That's surely got to stand. If it doesn't stand, then surely what they've put in the PCA doesn't count either. Pings off certain towers. You know, does that mean then that doesn't count either? That all they've got is DNA on a sheath they're prepared to throw out, and Dylan describing someone with bushy eyebrows? The next point I want to raise is a really important one. Remember that this has always been a targeted attack, according to law enforcement. From the very beginning, they stated that it was targeted and the community need not be concerned. It was either the house or a victim or the 4 victims. So now we know Kohberger wasn't stalking. What's happened to targeted? How did Kohberger decide to go into the 1122 King Road residence, you know, if he wasn't stalking? I think they now want us to believe that this was random. So that's another narrative that has changed. They're trying to make us believe now that on the 13th of November, Kohberger just decided then to go into a house with all those cars out the front. And he knew how to get in, and he knew where the rooms were. And more importantly, if it was random, he left 2 witnesses, 2 survivors, one of whom he walked past. It makes less sense than it did before. How would he have known that that was the house he wanted if he wasn't stalking? Make it make sense. I don't think they can make it make sense. We've got a whole different narrative now. I ventured into Vinnie Politan's live last night, and I left quite quickly. I hung around because I've watched some of his stuff on other cases. I know how he's behaved in this case, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I thought I'll hang around, see what he's got to say. After the first 5 minutes where I saw everyone in chat going on about how this wasn't an alibi, and then Vinny comes on and says the same thing and starts ranting about stargazing and all this stuff, there's zero open mind there. There is zero presumption of innocence. So I had a bit of a tantrum and said, I'm out of here. I'm sick of this damn bias bullshit. And I unsubscribed. And I've taught myself a lesson. I can't watch these things. I would quite happily sit on a chat and talk to people who were open-minded and have a proper intelligent discussion. But I am so shocked that they are just tossing this to one side and making a joke of the stargazing, when actually the alibi is going to be proof that he was not there, and they are just choosing to ignore it. Absolutely shocking. Well, anyway, guys, that's me. I've got another video drop this weekend, and hopefully a live Sunday night. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, baby, you'll get sick of being the